Greetings and welcome to Hacked Encountered. I'm Joe. In this video, we'll be doing a first look at the brand new game. Just received it. It's Inflection Point. It is from the Battalion Combat Series. That is from the gamers via Multi-Man Publishing and designed by the late great Dean Essig, who is also the series designer for Battalion Combat Series. And development was done by Carl Fung. Now, BCS. I've never actually done anything with BCS before, so this will be new to me. I'm also going to try and step up to OCS, but that will come later. For now, we're going to talk about this one. I'm going to flip her over here. I already took the shrink off because I didn't like the glare from the light, to be honest, but I have not yet cracked into the box. You'll just have to take my word for it. Anyway, here you see the back. It is a Battalion Combat Series game depicting two important but relatively unknown battles before and after Stalingrad. The battle for Kalach was fought in July 1942 following Case Blue, the successful drive into southern Russia. Paulus's 6th Army intended to encircle and destroy the Soviet armies and walk into Stalingrad. The Soviets were still recovering from Operation Barbarossa the year before. The result of the battle set up the epic urban fight that was the turning point of the Eastern Front. By December 1942, the 6th Army was trapped at Stalingrad by a more capable Red Army. In the Battle of the Chir River, the Soviets looked to exploit their gains and prevent German relief operations over a portion of the Kalach battlefield. Initial success along the Chir River, changed when the energetic 11th Panzer Division was thrust onto the scene. These two battles show the progression of the Red Army into an offensive army that could start fighting toe-to-toe against the invaders. For the Germans, the days of blitzkrieg successes were waning, and they were being put on the defensive. There was a marked inflection point, hence the title, around Stalingrad. All right, so what do we have in the box? We've got scenarios. There are 5 of them, and they use varying numbers of maps and turns. Battle for Kalach, 2 maps, 10 turns. Entry of the Tank Armies, parts of 2 maps, 3 turns. Battle of the Chir River, half map, 10 turns. Tormosin Offensive, half map, 3 turns. And Attack of the Fifths, half map, 4 turns. What we have in the box, the BCS Rulebook, version 2.0, 2 BCS charts and tables, BCS Support Rulebook, Inflection Point Rulebook, Kalach Game-Specific Rulebook, Chir Game-Specific Rulebook, Turn Record Track Card, 2 22 by 34-inch full-color maps, 1 19¼ by 17-inch color map, 1,120 counters, 2 unit sheets and 2 BCS markers, 5 scenarios total, 3 maps or smaller, of 3 to 5 turns, box and dice. Complexity is marked as medium, solitaire suitability is marked as high. All right, so let's take a look inside the box. And we have here our note. This is a typical of MMP. They put this in their games to indicate that this is what you should have in the box, and if you don't, let them know and they will provide support. That is good customer service. Then we have our Inflection Point Rulebook. Here are our series rules. These are a little heftier, right? The Standard Combat Series, which is the one I've played the most from the gamers, is a very thin book. This one is pretty chunky, 48 pages. Some good stuff here in the back in terms of an index. Gotta love the index. I'm a big fan of indices. And here we have the rules. So we will go through this like I usually do. We have our map. This is one of the maps. This would be a half map, or the smaller of the two, I should say. I shouldn't say half map. I should just say smaller of the two. So we'll get a look at this later. Just a quick, brief look. Here are some counter sheets. This is the markers. Okay, then we have here charts and tables. It's a fold out, I guess. Yes, it's a fold out. So we have the front, and then that, again, we'll look at all of this. We have another sheet of markers. Then we have the Chir specific rules, just a few pages. More map. Another counter sheet. This is units. We'll look at that as well. The Inflection Point rule book. So let me get all the rule books together because that's where I usually begin these things. Here's our second player's charts and tables, the other map, and the other counters. So I'm going to group all this together, and then here we have our track card, record tracks. And here is the series support book. So got some nice information in here. And then we've got a couple of dice, blue and white. We rolled a 10. Not that that means anything, just giving the dice a spin. All right, so I'm going to put, let's see, we'll put the maps on the bottom because I do those last. Keep the charts and tables together. Map, counters, markers, map. We'll do the markers and the counters. And our player aids. And there. And now we've got our written material, which is where I always like to start. So, as you can see, you've got a decent amount of reading material here to deal with, or to help you out, depending on your point of view, shall we say. But for me, this is good. The more information, the better. You don't want to fall victim of information underload, right? You want to know how to play the game. So let us take a quick spin through some of these rule books. We will start. Let me set this up backwards. We will start here with the series rules. That's where I like to begin. So let's start here with the series rules. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Okay, here we go. This is version 2.0 from 2021. The Battalion Combat Series is a simulation of grand tactical warfare from the advent of mechanized armies in the late portion of World War I to the present. It was created to show that warfare at this level has its own distinct nature and behaviors, a level wedged between tactical and operational warfare. It is neither a large-scale version of one nor a small-scale version of the other. BCS attempts to find the best balance between simulation accuracy and playability and not compromise either unduly. Doug Fitch's primer article on page 11 and Lynn Brower's Read This First article on page 8 of the support book are great ways to start. Enjoy and thank you for your gaming. This is written by Dean. So, game design, Dean Essig, as we mentioned. Here's your list of testers. Then we've got things about the editing of the rules and so forth. Here's our table of contents. Okay, so let's get right into it here. Basics, okay, scale, as you might expect from something called the Battalion Combat Series, that most units are battalions. Hex ranges from 1 kilometer to slightly over a mile, depending on the needs of the game. So we'll see that in our game-specific information. Series rules. Each BCS game contains both series and game rule books. Right, that's what we're looking at right now is the series rules. So we have series rules, game rules, support booklet. Then we've got maps. Every 5th hex row is numbered. We'll see that when we look at the map. Here are setup notes. The game rulebook contains setup information for the various scenarios presented, except as amended in the game rulebook. Always apply the following. Within X always means at or within X hexes. Units can set up anywhere within a zone specified to include its boundary lines. We'll talk about that when we do setup. And here's your first turn, which has a modification based on what's in here. Then we have our units. Okay, units are any counter in play that is not a type of game marker. Makes sense. HQs, combat trains, and support units are considered units, even though they have special requirements and representations that are different from, say, a run-of-the-mill infantry unit. Unit values, you've got an assault arrow, symbol used to identify units as being attack capable. Only attack capable units can be the attack unit in a regular attack. You have a movement allowance, of course, and then a movement class. The number's color shows the unit's movement allowance class on the counter. A red MA is tactical, a black MA is truck, and a white MA is leg. So these are the same as their OCS predecessors, except tactical has replaced tracked as armored cars are included. Okay, so there's your note. If you are an OCS player and you've never played BCS, that's probably an important thing to know. You have your armor value in range, rated by vehicle and gun. Vehicles have only one number. Range is assumed to be 1 hex if no values printed. Action rating from 0 to 5, which is the best, representing a unit's leadership, training, morale, and other soft qualities. And we have our steps. I saw those in the markers. They measure unit resilience. They are the number of losses a unit can absorb and remain effective. Units are rated for their size and organization. All right, so I won't go through all of this, but most of us, if you are a war gamer, are familiar with the concept of steps. This has a separate marker to help track it. This is by far not the only game type or series that uses that particular mechanism. Here is our unit key. So you can see you've got HQs that have a command radius, artillery points on their unused side. On their used side, you still have a command radius. It's smaller. Actually, no, it's the same. I'm sorry. My eyes are losing it here. And it's movement allowance, truck type, because it is black. Then you have AV, armored vehicles. You have steps available, the lower unit ID. Hard is the yellow symbol here. Formation ID, unit size, its movement allowance, and its tactical type because it's red, and its armor value, which is a red AV here. Okay. Dual units, you have an assault arrow on it. You have an armor value. It's not hard, white symbol. And it does also have the same red movement allowance that indicates that it is tactical type. Then we have infantry here, which does have an assault arrow, has a movement allowance, which is white for leg type. It has an action rating on the move side. So you have a deployed side and a move side. And then you have combat trains, regular and ghost, and then markers. All kinds of markers. We'll see those when we look at them, but also I won't go through all of these just for time reasons, and we'll see that when we do gameplay, which will be down the road a little bit. Not sure when. We have our AV types, right? So we kind of looked at this already. You've got red, then you've got limited, standoff, and light. Movement classes, we did talk about this. Tactical, leg, and truck. Background colors are representative only. So probably just they give a stroke around the number to make it stand out on the counter. Unit sizes, pretty standard symbology here. You have a support unit and then some other information here. Then we have our unit symbols, pretty typical NATO symbology. In most cases, you do have some things that are a little special, like the Joseph Stalin heavy tank, and so on. But we will cover this again when we do gameplay. Okay, unit counter sides. Most have 2 printed sides. The distinguishing feature between them is the movement allowance. The side with the lower MA is called deployed or deployed side. The side with the higher MA is called move or move side. If a unit has only 1 printed side, it is assumed to be showing its move side. Okay. More design notes here on that. Unprepared units. An unprepared unit is one that is neither attack capable nor has an AV showing at the moment. So it would therefore have no zone of control. It cannot attack or assist. It cannot use prepared defense effects. It cannot use support. It cannot jump HQs or combat trains. Cannot enter an enemy screen zone or an enemy control victory hex. Can spot for barrages, and it counts as a defender's second unit. Unit types, intrinsic units, units with a formation affiliation on the right side of their unit symbol. And in all games except Last Blitzkrieg and Baptism of Fire have a colored bar on their counters. They only belong to that formation. Okay, that makes sense. Independent units, these units do not have a designation to the right of the symbol, nor any colored bar. They can be assigned to any formation where they will act like its intrinsic units. They can be left unassigned, and they can be taken from one formation and assigned to another as the player might wish. And we have a headquarters, pretty standard, right? Command and control hub, combat trains, forward logistical establishment, artillery. Artillery is not explicitly represented in the game, but has been abstracted into arty points. Arty points can be intrinsic, those shown on, or those printed on the HQ's counter, or shown via separate arty point markers that can be assigned to the HQs as desired. Infantry, any unit that has no printed armor value number, is infantry for terrain DRM purposes on the combat table. Dual units are units that a unit that is attack capable and has an armor value. AV unit is a unit with an armor value. Then you have variations on these units. Support units, red AV units. These units are more capable of offensive action than the other varieties of AV units. Limited AV units with just an outline AV showing. These are more defensive in nature than the red ones. And they suffer a penalty on the engagement table as a firer. But they can give a DRM on the combat table to the defense, but not the attack of other units when in support. Standoff units, they have a black AV showing. These units are more defensive, but have uniquely long ranges and ability to be concealed. They can give a DRM on the combat table to the defense, but not the attack of other units when in support. And we have light AV units, hard units, breakthrough units, recon, non-rebuildable, and static units. Here are core concepts. This might be worthwhile to go over. I don't want to make this a full-on reading of the rule book. That would take a very long time. So I may start skipping or just briefly summarizing some things as best I can. But here are the core concepts. So this is a good one to kind of look at. In the most general form, BCS game turns play as follows. This description assumes given other rules of which it does not supersede. Reinforcements. One player, it does not matter which, rolls for weather. And then each player rolls to determine the available air and replacement points they will get. Both players simultaneously collect any reinforcements called for by the order of arrival. These are placed for arrival in this turn depending on where they are to enter and the type of unit they are. Replacements are used to rebuild losses. This might be on the map, a unit having lost some of its steps, upcoming reinforcements on the OOA, or in the dead pile when it's a unit which has lost all its steps. Each REPL can rebuild one step. A unit in the dead pile that has rebuilt a step comes back to life, oh, zombies, and returns to the map where it could continue to repair its lost steps. Air points the player obtains are kept in a pool to use for the entire turn, each one able to be used once. Any leftover air points will be wasted. You can use them in any activation of the turn as desired. Assignments. Independent units and arty points can be assigned or unassigned during the assignment phase. You can also reassign arty points already assigned by unassigning them this turn and assigning them elsewhere next turn as desired. Critically, the assignment phase is when the player can decide to commit units to the formation support or to release units currently in support to be real again. Orders. If being used, orders are issued to the formations regarding the turn's planned movements of their HQs to establish prepared defense and recover fatigue. First player determination. Determine the first player this turn if listed in the scenario for turn 1 only, or by a dice roll between the sides on all other turns. This will determine which player will get to go first. That player will select a formation to conduct an activation. Each formation usually gets to run one activation per turn. This is when it will get to do all the things the player wants the formation to do. This might allow the formation to run a second activation and do even more. Note that a formation that runs both its initial and second activations does so under the rubric of the one activation that formation gets to do. The players alternate activations until all the formations in play have activated or attempted to do so and failed. Activation: each time the player's turn in the active alternation occurs, he can select any of his available formations to try to activate. There may be a time at the end of the game turn where one side's formations are done and the other must keep going alone to use up its remaining formations. Each turn, all formations available to activate must do so. The alternating activations are the heart of the system of play. The activation routine is straightforward. Determine snafu, how good of an activation this one will be. Place OBJ markers where the formation intends to fight, so objective markers. Move and fight with the formation's units. Check to see if fatigue increases, and finally roll to see if the formation gets a second activation. If it does, repeat the above starting with snafu. Formation's units move and fight again, and it will check to see if fatigue increases again. Formation will be done at this point, and play passes to the enemy for their next activation. If you fail to obtain your second activation, none of the activities in the above paragraph occur, but instead you mark your HQ as done and play merely passes to the enemy. During an activation, use the tools in your toolbox to damage the enemy and try to achieve whatever objectives you need to win with your side. Some units can do certain things that others cannot, and we will see the unit capabilities chart to determine which. At the same time, while a given unit could do regular attacks, shock attacks, assists, engagements, attack by fires, or spot for barrages, only some of these might be the most effective and best use for the unit at that moment. See the play note regarding combat type integration on page 26 for more details. Knowing the right tool to use in various situations comes with experience. And F is the final thing, where the game turn ends. When all activations have been completed, flip or orient all HQs to their unused sides, advance the turn marker, and begin a new turn. All right, so that is the core of the gameplay. Formations, which are the functional block of units in the game. The main sequence of play revolves around the activities of one formation at a time, alternating between the two sides. Okay, we won't get into all of this. We already kind of discussed the intrinsic versus assigned units. As far as size goes, they vary from game to game. Formations could be divisions in one game or brigades in another, specific task forces or Kampfgruppen or KGs of various sizes can exist in either format. Command radius. It's an abstraction that keeps the formation's units from wandering too far from their formation HQ to allow the formation to be effectively under the HQ's command and control. That makes sense. There are things here that will modify that. And again, we'll get into all of this stuff when we do gameplay. Units, except combat trains, must end activations within the command radius. If this is impossible, the unit must either move or attack in a way that will help it to do so without foot dragging, in italics, or it can stay in its original hex and not move. Command radius does not restrict advance after combat. So your goal is to keep your units within command radius, which makes sense. You want to keep your formations intact. Bad stuff tends to happen when your formations become split apart too much. Okay, support the distribution of packets of armor and anti-armor weapons to the mostly infantry units of a formation. Okay, so this handles how you handle giving support to your units. We do have some multiple support units. They can help defend against engagements via a DRM, and that's in Rule 5.2b. Okay. Then we have fire events. They limit certain actions a unit might attempt. Only the actions listed below cost fire events. A unit can only initiate up to 2 fire events per activation. A unit stops upon expending its last available fire event. Units from a formation with either a full or a partial snafu result will still have both fire events. Formation with a failed snafu result has none at all. Okay. And then we have prepared defense. So you do have the ability to have prepared defense. Our design note says prepared defense represents the preparation of artillery, FPFs, which are final protective fires, and artillery mortar firing points, and not, as one might think, just digging holes in the ground. Okay, then over here we've got some examples of fatigue. At the end of each of the following activations, the player attends to fatigue as follows. And then there's a list of things here that impact fatigue, which is covered in Rule 1.8. Okay, our design note here notes that many players get confused as to what a second activation really means or why doing nothing but marching would garner a fatigue increase, but did not in previous rule versions. In a nutshell, the mistaken impression seems to be that a second act is somehow a division of the game's time scale. This would describe the turn scale as 2 turns per day, and the second activation is merely the normal afternoon turn. That's not correct. There is no set aside time for a second activation in many activities such as combat. Formation's efficiency generated a higher tempo, which allowed it to do more during the day or move on to take advantage of the situation. The earlier actions generated before the enemy even knew they were there. But in the case of marching all day for free, it isn't that the formation walked so much faster than normal at a higher tempo, but rather that it pushed on into the night to gain more ground. By definition, these actions will generate more fatigue. That makes sense. Running a bunch of cleanup activities such as flipping units and combat trains also means someone is doing all the normal things they must do overnight as well as all the next day activities. Expecting them to do all this without a fatigue increase is simply incorrect. That is an excellent point. Safe paths. This means a unit has a safe way to maintain connection with its own HQ. Safe path length cannot be longer than the formation's command radius plus 5 hexes. Trace a path of contiguous hexes, noting that terrain and ezocs matter. Okay, and then you have the rules for that stuff. Fog of War, you are free to look at an enemy stack's top combat unit and its values, but this freedom does not extend to units deeper in the stack. So no checking out the stacks, just the top. Okay, then we've got our game turn sequence, which we kind of saw earlier. We have the reinforcement phase, then assignments, orders, which are optional, where you would record on a piece of paper each formation's order status. That is an optional rule. First player determination, that's your dice off, or on the first turn it would be whatever the scenario says. Then your activations, which will alternate between the players until all formations are done, and your game turn end. Then you will do all your flipping and advance the turn marker and begin the new turn, back up with the reinforcement. Weather is part of the reinforcement phase, rolling for air points, all that stuff, right? Here's the reinforcement rules. The player can choose to keep an entry area hex from being overstacked by placing excess units off map next to it. This mechanic exists to keep the hex from ending up overstacked and vulnerable on entry if the formation botches a reactivation or snafu roll. Okay, and then you've got replacement rules, assignment rules, your optional order rules. Okay, and there's a bunch of this here. And yeah, so this design note is talking about how Dean struggled to find a simple solution for this process. Okay, then we've got activations and how activations work and all the rules. Therefore, here's your formation activation sequence. So we'll talk about this here because it's a nice overview. You've got HQ initialization, you've got preparation. Okay, so you will conduct strictly in order, add or increase the active formation's MSR blocked marker if the formation's combat trains are off map. Remove the active formation combat trains if the formation does not have a complete MSR. Remove the active formation's MSR blocked. What's MSR? Not sure what MSR is. See, let's use our handy dandy index. MSR, main supply route. There you go. Okay. All right. Snafu. So snafu is an interesting concept. The active player makes a modified dice roll on the snafu table, which I assume we'll see in the player aid, to determine that formation's snafu result. If the active formation is not currently mixed, remove its coordination marker after the roll. Decides if the formation is to do a failure flip activation as per 3.7D. You place your objective markers, then you have your activities, then you do cleanup, you figure out your fatigue, which is done by dice roll if it's possible, isolation, second activation, and then the other player turn. Here's our MSR explanation for main supply routes. Okay, so supply is important. Many games tend to give short shrift to supply. Obviously, OCS makes it fairly important. BCS does so as well, maybe with a slightly less complex system, perhaps. I'm not yet familiar enough with OCS to really weigh in on that definitively. Then we have our snafu rules. We have our objective rules. We typically need OBJ markers to attack, barrage, and take control of victory hexes. Place them during activations to identify where the formation will execute active operations. There are OBJ markers allowed by the snafu result, those created by the formation's recon units, and the one designating the HQ's march objective. Of these, all but march objectives are combat objectives, which generate objective zone hexes needed to conduct almost all attacks and barrages, as well as to take control of victory points. So this, in a oblique way, I guess, reminds me a bit of Tactical Combat Series (TCS), where you would plot out your the path your units would be taking with their objectives and so on. This is on a turn-by-turn basis and not pre-plotted. That's what the orders optional rule is for, when you write it down on paper. So that's a similar kind of thing. And then you have your different types, your zones, your recon placement and recon created, and then an explanation here of that. And we've got our activities. So these are all the things you can do during your activation. Then we have cleanup and determining who's isolated, right? Units that are cut off from their HQs suffer losses from isolation every time they activate. This is a more debilitating situation than when the units and HQ are isolated together by a blocked MSR, right? So they are cut off from their HQ. If they are with their HQ and then isolated, it's less debilitating. Then you have your fatigue, recovery, and failure flip. Here are charts showing what you can do. Things that make you stop, okay? Things you can do while you're stopped. Things you cannot do while you're stopped. Things that make you finished. Things you can do after finishing, which is spotting for barrages. And things you cannot do after finishing, okay? Movement rules. I did note traffic counters, so you do have to deal with that. Designer note, in BCS games before Panzer's Last Stand, traffic markers said stopped on them, short for traffic stopped. This was clarified in Panzer's Last Stand. Unit traffic was a part of plane traffic and the system standard for a long time. It was always a time-consuming matter and provided only modest returns. Some players loved it, others hated it. I'd suggest playing without unit traffic at first, only adding it later if you prefer greater detail. It does work well, but it is also a lot of work and time, as players will carefully orchestrate their moves. Okay, then we have terrain effects. Rules here also in the early part about switching sides from your counters. Flipping does not cost movement points. And then here are our stacking rules. Normal stacking rules. 2 combat units, HQs, support combat trains, and all game markers don't count for stacking. Overstacking is allowed, with exceptions in 4.2b right here, but brings with it DRMs on the combat table and multiple rolls on the barrage table. Okay, here's how you defend an overstacked hex. Then we have our zones of control rules. So HQ units, trained, screen units, and unprepared units do not have ZOCs. With the explicit exceptions in 4.3b, which I just read, combat units have ZOCs in the hexes adjacent to them. ZOCs come in two varieties: normal ZOCs generated by all but the units listed in 4.3b, and AV ZOCs, which are only generated by AV units. So you have EZOC effects. Okay, they affect movement depending on the moving unit's MA class and or type. No unit can move directly from one EZOC to another. Units can freely exit any EZOC it began its movement within, provided it does not move directly into another EZOC that affects it. Leg MA and truck MA units must stop if they enter an EZOC. TAC MA units must stop on entering an AV EZOC, real or support hex. This may require a stopping engagement, but only real AV EZOCs apply to TAC MA units for safe path determination. HQs can never enter an EZOC unless the EZOC is negated by a friendly unit. Then you have retreat rules. Appropriate EZOCs in a retreat's ending hex can inflict step losses. EZOCs that eliminate the safe path of leg or truck MA units may cause them to be unable to retreat and take a step loss instead. EZOCs have no effect at all on retreating TAC MA units. Okay, AV ZOCs affect the movement of enemy TAC MA units, whereas normal ZOCs do not. AV ZOCs are generated by real AV units or by support. These are real AV ZOCs or support AV ZOCs respectively. AV ZOCs are limited to hexes adjacent to it regardless of the unit's range. Support AV ZOCs are available to any currently supported unit. Stopping engagements. This kind of goes along with the zones of control. There's an example of that. Here's standoff support. Then we've got engagement zones. Screening, how screening works, HQs and combat trains, voluntary retreats, realistic movement, which is an optional rule. Combat, so here are the combat rules. Okay, combat type, integration. Learning to play the game requires understanding what types of combat to use versus the kinds of targets and the capabilities of your own units. Regular attacks, I'll skip this part. Let's just talk about becoming a great player. You have to know and arrange your forces to do so. Regular attacks are set-piece actions coordinated between assaulting and supporting units and fires to push the enemy out of position on the ground. Resolve these on the combat table. Shock attacks are rapid assaults by mechanized units exploiting their protection and mobility to decisively attack an enemy location. Shock attacks allow the attacking unit to continue movement afterwards. Resolve these on the combat table. Yeah, I'm losing my voice here. Engagements are fire exchanges between weapons platforms using AV strengths. Engagements are used to generate losses, to suppress support, and to free friendly units from movement. Unlike attacks, they do not represent an effort to seize terrain. Resolve these on the engagement table. So that's an important distinction. Attacks by fire use AV weapons against non-AV targets. Resolve these on the barrage table. And barrages use artillery and or aircraft to generate suppression effects or to inflict step losses on enemy location. Destruction barrages use the barrage table to create losses. Suppression barrages allow the player to apply DRMs on the combat table, but do not inflict any step losses. Okay. Terrain obviously has an effect. Here's a better description of the regular and shock attacks. And we have engagement rules, right, which are rules to that don't have the objective of pushing the enemy off a spot. Then we have attack by fire rules, barrage rules, retreat rules, advanced after combat, odd situations, urban warfare, so you have special rules for that. Formation destruction, attacks from off-map, optional planned fatigue, So this came from a proposal by Jim Stravers. Series of interrelated concepts. This is an interesting, so these are optionals. Standoff AV versus red support. And then our glossary is here. So pretty thorough 2-page glossary. Then we hit our examples of different types of AV, from hard red, non-hard red, breakthrough hard red, light AV, breakthrough light AV, limited AV, and standoff AV. And then here's our index, which actually runs a decent number of pages here, about 8. And then on the back, we have our unit capabilities chart. All right, that's our rules review for the main rule book. It took quite a lot of time. Here's our support book. So the support book, it says the best, this is a note from Lionel Martinez. I find the best way to learn rules is to write them out myself. My initial objective was to shorten the rules to be a better reference during play, but I soon saw myself reorganizing entire sections, eliminating repetition, incorporating optional into the core rules. Okay, so here's a note from Dean. With Lionel's kind permission, I have personally checked every line and word versus my update version 1.2 rules and made all rewrites. The resulting rules updated and rewritten as version 2.0 are 100% official. So he implemented the changes in the main rule book, which is right here, that we just looked at. These rules correct the known errata and clarifications to the 1.1 version 1.2 rules. Okay, basic items. So these are corrections. Designer notes here. Okay, so, but you gotta count them points. Inertia of what? So you can see what's in here, right? A bunch of information that's useful reading, I'm sure. Right, here's the section that was mentioned in the rule book about the article by Lynn Brower, where basically you read this and then you go into the rule book, which is a good idea, and I will actually do that. And you've got your BCS primer by Doug Fitch, another probably very interesting and useful read. That's the midpoint here, as I saw the staples. Kick and poppies, jumping HQs and trains. Complete activation example. Okay. German reactivation, activation sequence flow chart. ZOC types and effects chart. Assignment procedure chart. Combat train movement flow chart. Attack type crib sheet. And then the unit skills and vulnerability chart. So this is an interesting, something interesting to look at, because you have your unit types here. Then you have combat table, what they use, the engagement table, the barrage table, and the AV EZOC effect. So very useful. Okay, then we have the inflection point specific rules. Okay, here's our glossary. So it's a pair of games showing the changes in combat on the Eastern Front from the German advance toward the Don crossing at Kalach in late July of 42 and the fighting near the maelstrom of Stalingrad across the Chir River in December. So you got a 5-month difference there. For both sides, the way their armies fight in the East has changed and would never be the same again. So it's a good contrast, I guess, and that was the point of this, the whole inflection point of Stalingrad, that you have the, where the Germans are still kind of driving the action, and then at the end you have that kind of tipping point where the Germans are starting to be put on the defensive by the Soviets. Inflection point is dedicated to Dean, who's past Dean. I said Gene, what the hell? It's dedicated to Dean, that would be Dean Essig, whose passion for the series and design continued until his last day. His mentorship allowed the game to complete and continue his legacy. And there's Dean right there. Okay, so this is his designer notes. Why inflection point? And then Carl, designing in Dean's footsteps. Carl, I suppose, probably finished the game. And then we have our historical notes also from Carl. And player notes from Lionel Martinez. So a lot of interesting information about the various things in the game. Here's another thing from Carl about the order of battle for both the Germans and the Red Army. And then bibliography for the two battles. Now, I have the game, the standard Combat Series game. What is it called? I'm drawing a blank, but it's the battle on the Chir River. Why am I drawing a blank on this? It is Panzer Battles, the 11th Panzer at the Chir River. So that would be this one here. So you have your two separate games in one box. They use essentially the same maps, same footprint, just months apart on either side of that inflection point. So we'll talk about these when we play the game, and I might perhaps play this, and then, or before that, play Panzer Battles. Do both, so you can see the game as it exists, or the battle rather. Two different perspectives on it, both from the standard Combat Series viewpoint and from the Battalion Combat Series viewpoint. Obviously, the BCS is more complicated. Standard Combat Series is pretty straightforward and easy to play and understand. Battalion Combat Series is a more complicated animal, but that's not a bad thing. Okay, so let's look at some of our other components now. I can get it out of the box here. So here are our charts and tables. We do have 2 copies of this, right? One for each player. So here is your sequence of play and activation checklist for your pre-turn, right? The weather, air points, replacement points, all that stuff, right? Assignment, orders, first player determination. Orders, of course, optional. Then you have all activations, then your game turn end. Activation sequence here. Recovery or failure, flip activations, failure activations, and then our attack sequence. On the inside, we have more tables. Here's your combat table modifiers, right? Our combat table. Then our engagement table is here. Barrage table here. Then you've got your snafu table modifiers. The snafu table itself. Down here is the snafu result effects. Prepared defense crib sheet, retreat execution, and on the back, urban hex control chart, safe path, how you figure that out, legal hexes, stopped finished chart, right, which we saw in the rule book, things you can do when you stop, or things that make you stop, things you can do while stopped, things you can't do while stopped, and then same for finish. Isolation and fatigue increase table. Okay, good stuff, good stuff. All right, now here, turn record tracks. We have one for Kalach and one for Chir. Terrain key, all different types of terrain we see on our map. Down here, you've got your DRMs for the 2 battles for snafu. Here we have our air supply point track. The weather track is here, and again, there's 2 different ones, right? Because Chir was in December with rain and snow, and Kalach was in the summer with good weather, generally speaking. Then we have our REPLs, the replacements for both, and that is a single-sider, of course. Okay, now we have our counter sheets. Okay, so these are our markers, right? Here are the step tracks, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 steps on one side, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the other side. You also have standoff support, red support, your OBJ markers, right? MSR blocked markers, fresh with fatigue levels on the back, drop support, and coordination, the bottom here. Okay, so we have 2 sheets. They look to be identical as far as I can see, right? 2.0 standard BCS markers. They seem to be the same. So 2 of those. And then here we have our counter sheets. This is counter sheet 1, inflection point, counter sheet 1 front. So you have your units here. Okay, then we have various counters. And you can see the color-coded bars that go to mark what they are, right? 16th Panzer Division, 16th Panzer. And then all the different units. You can see some of these are red AV. Get a good look at the counters here for the various German units. And down here we have some Soviet units for the Red Army. Of course, they are double-sided in many cases, right? Because you have your different types. Now, unlike some games where one side is full strength, the other side is reduced strength, this is more about whether it's in move mode or not. And you can see the backs of the various counters. And then we have this one, which is sheet 2, which has the balance of the Soviet army, which is fairly large and numerous, as well as your weather counter, a weather track, your turn marker, activation, air supply, traffic counters, more support drops, and then, of course, on the back you can see same kind of thing. Okay. Now let's get into the maps. So let me reset my camera. Okay, so this is the Chir map. Okay, so here's the river. The Chir River is right here. Okay, here's the Don in this lower corner. Okay, the big river. And you've got some towns on here and so on. Some hills with numbered hills. State Farm number 79 there. Sysoikin maybe. My Russian is not good. And up at the top, which I guess you probably couldn't really see much, you've got your entry points, as well as over here on the side. Okay, victory point hexes. There are a few here. That is Rikovsky and Vernichersky. Oof, man, that's a hard one. Surovikino up there with that one's worth. There are 2 victory point hexes adjacent to each other right there. So VP, 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 and then so on. So this is this is the small map, right? The big maps are probably going to take me actually changing my, well, that's map B. So let's do map A first. So this is map A, and I'm gonna take it out, and I'm gonna change up my shot because this is a large map and it will not fit in the current camera shot. So give me a moment. Okay, so this is map A. All right, pretty large. Well, it's not like it's gigantic, but it's large-ish, and there's not a ton. It's a lot of open terrain, it looks like. There are some water, or there is some water in terms of rivers and streams and so on. I don't see a big, well, here's a larger river down here. It's not identified. Maybe that's the Don, I'm not sure. But you have rivers that feed it. It is the Don. That's up here. It's the Don. So I'm assuming it kind of loops around and comes back. I'm not sure where map B joins. It probably joins below this one, is my guess. But again, you have victory point locations on here. I think, maybe. Thought I saw one somewhere. Maybe not. All right, but you do have routes. Route A. There's a route B down here. These 2. Okay. So we do have some stuff on here. So let me switch and look at map B now. Okay, here is map B. And Kalach is right here. And the Don River. And you can, there's a German here on, well, there is a victory point hex here and here for the Germans, I guess. And here's Surovikino, right? Because this is the Chir River. So the Chir River being a smaller subsection, I guess, of this map. And you've got routes D and E, C, D, E up here. Some larger hills in various places. We've got railroad. We've got some roads. Again, you've got the Chir and the Don River on here. We've got some marshy ground at the very bottom down here. Yeah, the bottom of the map. This is map B. So this is below map A. Okay. So yeah, fairly large map. I will be able to get the whole thing on my table. I just won't probably be able to show it all in one shot. But I might be able to do some kind of composite something to get the whole thing in there. I can only go so high and zoom out so much with my camera. Anyway, that is a look at the game Inflection Point from MMP, The Gamers, designed by Dean Essig. I suppose this is likely, unless he had something else he was working on, this is probably his last design. So I'm hoping that this will be an enjoyable one. I do like Eastern Front, and yeah, a very interesting dichotomy between the two fights. The Germans on the offensive, and then they're kind of well, the battle on the Chir River. The Germans did do some attacking there as well, but the situation had drastically changed, obviously, over the course of those nearly 6 months. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. I do thank you, as always, for watching. I hope you found it interesting. It has been a very long one. A large part of that was the rules. If you took the rules out, you're probably looking at like a 10 or 12-minute video. But anyway, I put the rules in there because some people like the rules overview. Others can skip it. That's what the little skip or chapters, that's what the chapters are for. You can pick what you want to watch. But as I said, I'm done. Please consider liking, sharing, and or subscribing. If you are already a subscriber, I thank you for your support. I do appreciate it. And yeah, that is it. Any comments, questions, etc., you know where to put it, right in the old comment section. But until next time, I'm Joe. This is Hexed Encountered. And as always, happy gaming.